Welcome to From the Quarries, and let's go back in time, 97 years to be exact, to the year 1925. The war to end all wars has been finished for 7 years, and America is going through a period of unparalleled prosperity, known to us today as the Roaring Twenties. A group of bright young things have formed a club, the World Savers Club, where they debate issues of national and international importance under the guidance of a wise old Freemason. To them, he puts a challenge. What is the most important problem we are facing today? He then sends a letter to 50 notables and luminaries in American society asking that very question. Their responses and his answer to the question are of interest and significance even today. And if you're the sort of person who'd like to get right to the meat of the matter, I'd suggest you skip Brother Hungerford's introduction and go straight through to 8 minutes 40, where you'll find out exactly what they had to say. By contemporary standards, some of it sounds outlandish, and some is even highly controversial and shocking to modern ears, but a lot of it is not. And despite the intervening century, there is still a lot that we can learn from that question that was posed so many years ago. I really hope you enjoy the journey. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation, From the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore. The ban upon discussions of sectarian religious questions and partisan political problems in lodges has proven a wise precaution on the part of the founders of Freemasonry. Like every good policy, however, this ban upon partisan and sectarian arguments may be stretched beyond its natural limitations so as to read into it a prohibition never intended by its originators and entirely contrary to the basic objectives which the rule itself seeks to foster. For example, where certain narrow-minded definitions of this rule attempt to prescribe all discussions of the great problems of religion or of world welfare, in my humble opinion, we are emasculating Freemasonry by a denial of the cardinal principles on which our great fraternity has been established. It is easy for critics to claim that Freemasonry is not a forensic forum or a debating club. No pretense is made to the contrary. But does anybody deny that seeking light, more light, and still further light is proclaimed as the central activity for all candidates for advancement in our mystic order? If light-seeking does not mean investigating, discussing, and studying the problems of life, what does it mean? In brief, I contend that those who denounce this sincere effort to stimulate the discussion of present-day problems in Masonic lodges have lost sight of this principal aim of our craft. We are seekers after true Masonic light. We are builders of temples not made with hands. We profess the broadest principles of benevolence and brotherhood and seek to serve humanity and advance the interests of civilization. How can we accomplish these worthy aims and endeavors unless we investigate, discuss, and study the conditions of our world today and seek to make a practical tie-up between the principles and practices of our ancient craft and the present-day problems of humanity? Those who charge us with attempting to inject political and religious disputes into our lodges are deluding themselves and raising up a bogeyman. While we do not pretend that weak, frail mortals will keep their discussions of any proposition entirely free from expressions of personal prejudices and partisanship, we maintain that the best way to minimize the amount of bigotry and intolerance in any discussion is through the choice of subjects of such broad and basic universal interest that the natural trend in their discussion will be upon a high plane. In other words, It is the trivial and narrow nature of the questions discussed which, generally, accounts for the airing of petty notions and unkind personalities. Real charity demands real understanding. If we are to practice charity in accord with the tenets of our profession that the scope of Masonic charity is without limits, certainly this means that Freemasonry is vitally interested and deeply concerned in all the real problems of humanity everywhere throughout the world. The conclusion inevitably follows that the investigation, discussion, and study of world conditions and worldwide problems should be a definite factor in every Masonic program. If the outlook of Freemasonry is not a worldwide viewpoint, our professions of universal benevolence and brotherhood would certainly seem like hollow mockery. Yet we must confess that the charitable aims of some lodges, we have observed, seem to be about as circumscribed as those of the old fellow who prayed, "Lord bless me and my wife, and my son John and his wife, us four and no more. Amen." Before we can properly inquire 1. Why, 2. To what extent, and 3. In which ways Freemasonry ought to participate in aiding the solution of present-day world problems, we must first make some survey of these problems to discover and decide what problems are of outstanding importance. This is by no means an easy task, since we shall find no unity of opinion as to what is the most important problem before the world today. In fact, we shall find that there are almost as many claims that certain particular problems are paramount as there are prominent leaders in various phases of world affairs. For example, a few years ago, the writer was the leader of an informal group of members of the younger generation, who, because of their propensity to engage in red-hot debates on all sorts of subjects, were dubbed the World Savers Club. One day, in this group, this question was raised, and, as a result, on the following day, I wrote a note to about 50 persons, selected, covering a wide range of viewpoints and interests, and each representing real achievements in a particular field of activity. I was both gratified as well as pleased to find that so many of these prominent persons responded so promptly and with such evident personal interest to my request that our World Savers Club would like to have their views as to what should be considered the foremost problem before the world at that time, about 4 years ago. Brief excerpts from the replies of a number of these well-known personages are presented herewith. What is the most important problem we are facing today? The provision of international substitutes for war. The promotion of a League of Nations or its equivalent. The achievement and preservation of peace in the world. The just distribution of wealth. The reorganization of industry in terms of cooperation and democracy. Equality of opportunity. The abolition of poverty. The elimination of pauperism among children. Shall alcoholism and venereal disease, acting in combination as they have been doing for more than a century past, and aided as they now are by birth control and the rejection by some women of motherhood as their most desirable occupation, be allowed to extinguish before long the whole race, or be resisted to the utmost by effectual means now available? The general prevalence of venereal diseases. The spreading of radical propaganda. Shifting standards of morality among women. how to preserve personal, civil and political liberty in the face of a movement which, by the use of conformities, aims to establish law-made conformity and mediocrity for all. Making the most of our lives while having as good a time as possible. Making a living in a manner which shall be helpful to other people. The clear conception of an objective for our civilization. From a clear conception of an objective, we might formulate a practical and binding working philosophy. With a realistic and cogent working philosophy, one could go to work at producing a type of democratic character. And thus, the movement of disintegration now so observable in our society, the movement towards disintegration and anarchy, might be checked. Can modern civilization morally control and socially use the results of modern science? Every other problem is subsidiary to this. The home. The religious education of the young and the re-education of the mature, where needed. Preventing what the French call the petty bourgeoisie from vulgarizing our whole civilization. The land question. While some of those whose opinions are presented here have since passed to the great beyond, I believe it will be agreed that the group, as a whole, represents a fairly broad cross-section of American leadership. So, it seems quite probable that any similar questionnaire today would bring forth a like diversity of opinion. In brief, any broad survey of world problems will always disclose a wide variety of viewpoints as to the relative importance of all these problems. So we may not hope to ever reach a common accord or agreement as to any one or two problems as being of paramount importance. As a matter of fact, it is not of utmost importance that we reach a common agreement that one or another world problem is of all-surpassing importance. The more pertinent inquiry is to see if we can discover a common denominator for all these problems, something that will act as a sort of universal solvent to them all. I sincerely believe that there is such a common denominator or solvent. Also, I maintain that we shall find this solvent, this cure for the ills of the world, in the basic doctrines and fundamental principles of Freemasonry.